Good day, spiritual artists. It is now day 4, and we are about to start reading the book on chapter 1. It's called The Lesson. And we are reading chapter 1 of my book, The Spiritual Artist. I'm glad you're sticking in with me on this Doodle sketchbook book club. So you should have a sketchbook or a piece of paper with you and let yourself free associate. You can draw words, you can draw shapes, sort of like when you were in school and the teacher was going on and you just kind of drew imagery. I found that this is a really great portal to opening up your creative inspiration. So let me start with chapter 1, the lesson. Quote, your journey has molded you for your greater good, and it was exactly what it needed to be. Don't think you've lost time. It took each and every situation you have ever encountered to bring you to the now, and now is the right time. Asha Tyson. All right, chapter 1, the lesson. It's day 10 of the coronavirus invasion in America. A little more than a week has passed since I watched schools close, businesses shutter their doors, and citywide events cancel. I just returned from the grocery store with my 15-year-old son and was sitting in my art studio reflecting on our recent experience. It was the first time we had ventured outside of our home since the crises began, and we were required to physically distance ourselves while in the store. We were shocked by the store's condition and the sense of fear that permeated the aisles. Entire rows of shelves lay empty. Signs declaring purchase limitations were taped haphazardly throughout the store. Perhaps far worse were the looks on the faces of most of the other shoppers. Some showed a sense of disconnect, and others displayed looks of outright terror. Despite what surrounded us, I maintained my cheerful demeanor for myself and my son, and I smiled at the other shoppers. About halfway through the third aisle, when I excused myself while stepping in front of another shopper, my comment was met with no response and an empty stare. As a very weary cashier checked out our purchases, my son shared concerns about the panic overcoming many of his friends and their families. How can something like this happen so quickly? How can this sort of fear and emotional meltdown happen in one of the wealthiest, most privileged places on the planet? As we exited the store and headed to our car, we were finally greeted by a small face. As we exited the store and headed to our car, we were finally greeted by a smiling face. It was on the face of a woman entering the building. I returned her smile and wished her a good day. She was the first spiritual artist we had encountered during the entire trip. I wasn't sure how long this coronavirus pandemic would last, but I suddenly realized one thing. A select group of people were able to maintain a sense of peace and joy amid this upheaval. These people are spiritual artists. They preserve their conscious connection to the divinity within, despite the limiting circumstances that surround them. They live in the light and let love flow through them as them. How do they do it? Through practice. I chose to write this book after I learned how to attain the state of a spiritual artist through painting, but I can see how these lessons apply to everyone in all facets of life. Follow me on my journey and discover that everyone has this power within. The power is our divine inheritance, and accessing it takes continual practice. There's no question that the coronavirus has and will create loss and pain across the world. This book is in no way attempting to deny or ignore the loss of lives from this disease. We will need to stop, acknowledge, and feel the pain. We will help our families, neighbors, and the greater community by expressing love and caring. We can do this best by accessing our inner spiritual artist, our conscious connection to all that is. We will access compassion, strength, and inspired solutions that will assist us through this challenging time through this connection. Once home, as I looked out my studio window and reflected on the entire experience, I was struck by the beautiful sunset. Birds were singing their evening songs. An owl sat in the entryway of the box I had built for it. It is indeed a beautiful life. I saw and felt the harmony of life that surrounded me. My unfoldment as a spiritual artist started in a painting studio. Many years ago, I picked up a paintbrush to discover myself through creative expression and found my meaning in life instead. I learned how to connect to a greater power in each moment of the day, and I realized that this is the only task before me. With a conscious connection, all else falls into place. There is a power that surrounds me and resides within me, and it has many names. Painting is a metaphor. As it is for everyone, life has been an experience of learning and growing for me. Shortly after the year 2000, I decided I wanted to learn the skill of painting. I knew that it would require a long learning process, but I had lower back problems and wanted to learn a trade that would take me out from behind a desk. Painting allowed me to move around as I worked, squash between spending time on my advertising business and my many other life passions. I knew I would be taking small steps toward the mastery that I expected, and that the process would take years of discovery. 20 years later, I realized that learning to paint or being creative in any manner is a lifelong adventure, both technically and spiritually, and that there really is no mastery. It's a continuous, ongoing process that takes place throughout our lives. But I believe that we are asked to focus on the moments of that passage and not the result. Learning to paint has taught me many spiritual concepts and brought me back to a belief in a greater power. This book chronicles those lessons. I've decided that I want to record them for several reasons. First, to share my experience with other artists and life travelers. Second, as a reminder for me to revisit these lessons should I forget them. And I do forget them. Someone once told me that I intrinsically know these spiritual truths, but somehow, wrapped up in the challenges of daily living, I forget them. This book is my process of remembering. Just as Hansel and Gretel left a trail of breadcrumbs, I am writing this book to find my way home. This book is my journal, or better yet, my cherished trail of breadcrumbs for this process of co-creating with spirit. We all know many of these concepts, but life can distract us from using them. As an artist, I share them with other artists from all mediums. Whether a butcher, a baker, or a candlestick maker, these teachings are daily reminders for all creators. After all, everyone is an artist. Whether you're painting, throwing pottery, raising children, or building a business, we're all spiritual artists in the act of the creative process. Our task in life is to express our unique isness through the creative process. It's all about the state of a spiritual artist. I have a confession. I know that I'm not a famously gifted artist. I'm starting to suspect that it's only by being an average artist that I've discovered the secret to painting as a spiritual artist. While I paint often, only occasionally do I produce an incredible piece of art. A tremendous creative manifestation that I would even call inspired. Not often, but every once in a while. I also notice that when I'm creating this work, I seem almost to be expressing a greater power than myself. This powerful energy flows through me and from me. Over time, I realized that this connection reinforced my belief to a greater power. This power and energy flow through the entire universe. It is the power behind the growth of an acorn, the rain falling from the sky, the rotation of the planet, and the movement of the stars. It is life manifest. Most importantly, I realize that I feel a deep awareness and closer attention to this greater power through painting. As a spiritual artist, I realize that it's not about the finished work itself, but more about the state achieved during painting. I wanted to revisit this state as often as possible and began the habit of tracking my process. How did I reach this state of inspired creativity? Could I reproduce it? I watched my process and wrote down the steps. I've learned a system for connecting to this power and expressing the joyful act of creation. I noticed that my desire to create something judged as worthy by others gets in my way of this connection. I've learned that my goal is no longer one of fame or prosperity, but of spending the most time possible in this state. It's not easy to remember this lesson. I often forget the importance of my state when I'm caught up in the day-to-day struggles of making a living and paying the bills. When I seek the approval of others in society rather than enjoying my own self-knowing, I lose my direction. Just recently, I fell into this trap as I struggled before the canvas. With each stroke, my thoughts were forced on hurrying towards completion. My mind was reeling with a variety of questions. Are these colors trendy right now? Does this look sophisticated or childish? Does this look anything like I've seen produced by other artists? Seeking outside approval was the source of these questioning thoughts. Unfortunately, after spending more than 20 years running a marketing and design firm, I had mastered thinking outside of my head and putting myself into my client's mindset. This skill was an asset when running a business, but it had become a significant hindrance to my growth as a spiritual artist. How incredible to find myself back in the struggle. Once again, I was standing before the canvas with my critical thoughts to keep me company. I stopped. I looked out at the window at my garden and I took a deep breath. Then I heard a small yet sturdy voice within me say, remember, remember, it's all about the state. It's only about the state of conscious connection to something greater than ourselves. How do I manage to forget this lesson over and over? Even after 20 years of painting and more than 50 years of living, I often forget that I have this incredible power at my fingertips. We all do. We get caught up in achieving results and forget the importance of maintaining our state of connection to all that is. I'm sharing my journals so that others may follow what I have. These steps are not ironclad rules that you must follow. After all, everyone is a unique expression of this greater power and expresses themselves differently. You might discover that your process is slightly different. Don't let my steps hold any authority over you. Just let them inspire you. I invite you to take from my artistic adventure of discovery what works best for you and discard the rest. As you'll soon find, we each have our unique path to follow, and follow it we must. Well, the sun is setting in a fiery orange glow, and the natural activity outside my window is slowing down. The owl has flown from the box and is scouting the yard for something to eat. Life, a beautiful life, goes on. The coronavirus pandemic will be a universal challenge and will test everyone's strength. But I do know one thing. I know that I shouldn't look outside of myself for the answers. No politician, no minister or public speaker is my connection to all that is. I'm not ignoring reality. I'm making my own. Admittedly, I will still spend 1 hour each day consciously reading the news. I will thoughtfully take the necessary precautions when honoring my humanity and love for others. But I will only give 1 hour of my focus to outside influences. I choose to turn off the news for most of the day. I must continue to practice my art, stay consciously present to the divinity within, and listen to my inner guidance. The divine is waiting for us to wake up and discover our creative nature. We are meant to be creators, or rather co-creators, with this greater power. I am a creator. You are a creator. We are all created by and as expressions of love. We are individualized expressions of the spirit. Being a spiritual artist is a lifelong decision and practice. I invite you to start on your holy, unique journey. So, I think this chapter is pretty well written, actually, and pretty clear, but I really want to talk about this one key point from here. As you hear, this was a time when the world was melting down, and it sometimes feels like it is now, and it continues to. And we notice, and I notice, that there are people that manage to hold their bearing. They stay in their conscious connection with love, even when everything around them is falling apart. And I remember so clearly that day leaving that store where everybody was so terror stricken and fear based, and seeing that smiling woman step up on the curb and go into the store behind me. She was holding her conscious connection. She was staying in the state of love. And that really is our number one goal. So I'm going to repeat that to you. Staying connected to spirit, or all that is, knowing that we are all one, that is your number one priority. Not to scratch things off your to-do list, not to take care of the home, not to pay your bills, not to any of those things, all those musts. They're there, and you will have to take care of them sooner or later. But the first thing you should do every day, sit down, ground yourself, and have a spiritual practice, a connection to all that is. So do that. Start doing that in the morning. Make sure you do not turn on your phone. Make sure you do not turn on the news. Sit down and just breathe. Look at the world around you. Honor your connection to all that is. And better yet, throughout the day, practice that. If you're sitting in the doctor's office, instead of grabbing a magazine or like we all do, looking at your phone, just put it down and look at the beauty that surrounds you. Breathe it in, feel your space, feel your place, and feel your connection to spirit. Thanks for following me on this. I hope you're enjoying this process. If you have any questions, please feel free to write them down in the notes and I will respond to any questions you have about these concepts. Go out there and be a spiritual artist. Thank you. Thanks again for listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Whether you're watching this show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or iHeartRadio, make sure you choose the subscribe button so that you will receive updates when new segments are released. Most importantly, be still, listen, and know that you are a spiritual artist.